Right then, the topic, as announced, is GData's mail security. And I hardly need to convince anybody here that email protection these days is not a commodity, but a necessity, and a vital necessity at that one, I'd say. Because if you look at the current statistics, then you would find that a lot of infections or malware infections on systems can be traced back to emails, to an email attachment, a link that was contained in an email, but emails are more often than not the root of a lot of the pain that we're facing today when it comes to malware infestation. Then obviously we want to have protection not only from malware infection but also from phishing emails. And phishing emails, if you go out on a limb, I'd say that every one of us gets at least 2 or 3 every week of that. And those phishing emails have become really, really good. Sometimes it's pretty hard to, immediately say, well, okay, that's a legitimate email, and that is not a legitimate email. There was one incident where I got an email that was supposedly from DHL, it's a small logistics provider that you probably are all familiar with, and they're offering a service called Packstation here in Germany, where you can have packets mailed to a deposit box for you to pick up when you're not at home. And you know the way those phishing emails work. They usually tell you, dear user, there's something amiss with your user account. Please click on this link and log in to your customer account to put things right. And I mean, of course, the email went to an email address that I haven't even registered with the service. So, well, some people might think, well, it's very forthcoming from them to, look for my other email addresses. But anyway, those phishing emails, and that one in particular, was so well made that I really had to look 3 times until I had, made sure that this was really a fake email. So the people who make those phishing emails are becoming, better by the day. And of course, what you also want protection from is the old spam email from all those nice little people who wish to sell us some sort of dodgy medication. So that's the reasons why everybody basically wants email protection, and in most cases already has email protection to some degree. So for that, GData offers 2 solutions. Those 2 solutions are called mail security. So no surprise there. And those solutions that are called mail security are obviously there to scan email communication for all of those 3 things: for malware, for phishing emails, and of course to filter out unsolicited email, otherwise known as spam. And since the mail security solution from GData comes in 2 different flavors, the first question would be, what flavor of mail security would you like? You can choose between an add-in for Microsoft Exchange and an email gateway. We'll get to the email gateway in a minute. First of all, the Exchange add-in is available obviously for Microsoft Exchange 2007, 2010 and 2013. And what this solution does is it scans the information store of Microsoft Exchange for any malware. So all those email attachments that make it into your inbox will be scanned by GData's Exchange add-in. So that is the data at rest taken care of. If you're running a Microsoft Exchange server, you have the information store covered. And just out of curiosity, I'm going to launch another poll right now. Which email servers do your customers usually use? Is it Exchange or any other kind of mail server? So just give me a quick show of hands, which type of email server is the most common one among your organizations or your customers. Okay, so we have a sort of balance between the people who use Microsoft Exchange and those who use some sort of other email server solutions. So obviously Microsoft Exchange people are already covered with the Exchange add-in. Of course, this is not the only thing that you can do to protect your emails, because the other flavor of mail security, which is the email gateway, is compatible with any email server, whether it's a Windows-based one like Exchange or HMail server, whether it's Lotus or some Unix-based solution, or in fact any other kind of email server. So if you run Microsoft Exchange, you're in luck. You can use both, even in combination. So you can have the information store protected by the Exchange add-in and regular scans of the email database, and you can also use the email gateway to scan all the data while it is in transit. So all the data that is flowing into and out of your email server can be monitored by GData's Mail Security Gateway. And of course, it scans for malware, it scans for spam messages, it contains a language filter, and it contains a number of other filters, among which are black, white, and gray listing. The main difference between the Exchange add-in and the email gateway is that the Exchange add-in only does malware scanning for the information store. It doesn't yet do anything else. So Microsoft Exchange, as I said, needs to be installed on your Exchange server 2007, 2010, or 2013. It also must be installed on an Exchange server. Sorry, my mouth's getting dry. It must be installed on an Exchange server which hosts the mailbox server role. So if you have a hub transport server in there, you can't install it on that one, but you can instead install it on your mailbox server. And all the configuration for the Exchange add-in and for all the reports are managed via a management server. And when it comes to a management server, you can decide whether you want to use a dedicated instance of management server specifically for your Exchange add-in, or you can opt to just use a management server that you have already in place for the rest of your GData installation. And that choice is made during the installation of Mail Security. So at one point it is going to ask you whether to connect to an existing management server, and therefore also to the SQL database of that management server, or whether you would prefer to install a dedicated management server and SQL database for Exchange only. So that is the Exchange add-in taken care of in brief. Now the Mail Security Gateway, as I said, is compatible with any kind of mail server. Mail Security itself, though, must be installed on a Windows machine. That can be a physical machine, that can be a virtual machine. So as long as it runs a supported version of Microsoft Windows, which is Windows XP Service Pack 3 or higher, up to Server 2012 R2, so long as the Mail Security Gateway machine is running one supported version of Windows, you can install Mail Security the Mail Security Gateway on it. The Mail Security Gateway requires a SQL server for certain functions. Installing a SQL server is not mandatory in order to use the Mail Security Gateway, but if you want to use specific functions like the gray list filter, for instance, then you need an SQL server. Of course, we provide an SQL Express setup inside the mail security installation, but you can as well use a SQL server that you may already have in place. And depending on your setting of email server, it might be necessary to reroute your email traffic if need be. That need may arise if you have mail security and your email server running on the same machine. But we'll get to that in a second when we take a look at the software itself. One other key difference between the Mail Security Gateway and the Exchange add-in is that the Mail Security Gateway has a separate administration interface. So whereas the Exchange add-in connects to the management server and can be controlled via the GData administrator, which you are already familiar with, the Mail Security Gateway has its own management interface. But same as with the GData administrator, that management interface for the Mail Security Gateway can be installed on any machine as long as it has a connection to the machine that's running the Mail Security Gateway. Well, so much for the theory. I'm going to stop sharing the slide deck right now to switch over to the virtual machine. So don't be surprised if the screen goes blank right now. There we go. So in here we have our virtual machine, which already has GData's Mail Security installed. And when we open GData's Mail Security, you can see there's a dedicated shortcut for Mail Security. We open that, we enter our highly complicated and cryptic password, and this is the interface of GData's Mail Security as it will look the moment you first log in. So as you can see, the Mail Security Gateway is not live, if you will, when you have installed it. So in order to make it filter and process emails, you need to configure it first. So for this case, we'll assume that this box, which is running Mail Security, is a separate box. The email server itself is sitting on another machine. And in order to make Mail Security process incoming emails, you would need to go for your options. And since we get our emails pushed via SMTP, we need to put a tick in that box. So you can see those options have become active. Those can be configured now. This is the port which will be used to forward email to the email server. If you happen to have Mail Security and your email server installed on the same machine, then you would need to make changes in this port, because otherwise we would have a port conflict here if Mail Security and your mail server were listening on the same port. You know, that is most likely to end in some degree of chaos. So then we can choose to use either DNS to forward the email to our email server. That we can do if, for instance, our email server has its own MX record. In this case, it doesn't have that, so it does have that, so we can leave the box ticked. But if you need, you can also supply your own data in here. So, and if that's the port that the server is listening on, then You can leave it at that, or you can enter any other port there which is configured to receive traffic on your email server. Then further at the bottom here, you can find what's called a relaying protection. In here, you can make sure that only those pieces of communication reach your email server which are actually addressed to your domain or to any of your email addresses. So if we supply the domain examplecode.com here, it will only accept emails that have a recipient address with the domain examplecode.com. That works for domains. So if you have multiple domains that you are managing, then you can put them in here, or you can put in your Active Directory users. So what this function does is, as soon as you supply your domain controller, your base DN, and your login credentials, you can have Mail Security pull a list of all the email addresses from your user database and put it into the relaying protection dialog of Mail Security. So automatically this function will only make Mail Security accept emails which are destined for one of those recipients. All other emails will be rejected if they are not in that particular list. And you can also import and export your own list. The settings for outgoing emails are also, I would say, pretty much straightforward. You just need to put a tick in the box, and this is the port on which Mail Security is going to excuse me, is going to listen for any emails that are destined for somebody else, so destined for the outside world. So not really anything surprising in here. And as soon as we hit apply, you will see that those options here jump to enabled. And that already is the very basic configuration for GData's Mail Security. But Mail Security does a lot more than just malware scanning. You probably have seen it up here already. Those are the Those are the options for your malware check. I think the options themselves explain, are pretty much self-explanatory. So nothing really fancy right here. If an inbound email happens to contain a malicious file, then you can select which action you would like to take. You can also opt to insert a warning, like a tagline in the subject, square bracket, virus, square bracket. So that's, I would say, pretty much straightforward. You can also configure an email address which should receive a notification if a malicious email attachment was detected. In that case, I've called this spamadmin@examplecode.com. So you can fill in there whatever you need. And down here you have an option that says report virus results to GData management server. Now, as I said, the management of all the settings still takes place from this separate management interface. The only thing that is reported to the management server will be any findings of malware that Mail Security happens to detect in any incoming emails. Those are then forwarded to the management server. I probably don't need to explain a lot about the scan parameters. Those are the same that you will find in the GData administrator if you configure your local antivirus client. So that's malware protection. But of course what Mail Security is most commonly used for is spam filtering. And the spam filter can be set to react in different ways if it comes across a spam message. It can deliver the email, and just insert a warning, for instance, in the subject, like so. So if you see the tagline spam in your email subject, then you know that is being inserted by the Mail Security Gateway. You can also forward that email to a specific email inbox. Some organizations do it like this. They set up a dedicated inbox for just such cases where it's not entirely sure whether an email is actually spam or not, but where you are reluctant to, just delete all those dodgy emails right off the bat, because there still might be some emails in there that have landed there by accident. So that is your safety line then, if you will. Or as a consequence, if the email is most definitely spam, then you can have the email rejected. The user will never get to see the email and it's just dropped. Then you can set up a whitelist and a blacklist. So if you add a certain email address or domain to the whitelist, the spam filter is automatically disabled for those specific email addresses or domains. So if you want to prevent emails from a certain sender to be flagged as spam emails because you do business with them on a regular basis and they have had issues like that before, you can put them onto your local whitelist, which you also can import or export to or from a text file. The same is true for your blacklist. So once you put an email address or a specific domain onto your blacklist, all emails from that particular sender address or from that particular domain will automatically be treated as spam. And there's a thing that's called real-time blacklist. Now, real-time blacklists contain the IP addresses and names of servers which are currently known for distributing unsolicited email. And those lists are updated, hence the name, in real time. So whenever there's a new server out there where, let's say, a network administrator has carelessly left open an open relay server, then it won't be long before that makes the blacklist. Per default, we are supplying 3 different ones, which come from Manitou, SpamCop, and SpamHouse. But if you have your own blacklist provider, then you can, of course, also use that. So you just remove that tick from the box and enter the URL of that blacklist provider in here. Now, if it comes to the spam filter, let me give you a little bit of background here. The spam filter works on a score-based system. Those score-based systems, if you have worked with something like Spam Assassin before, then you'll be familiar with the concept. So each email gets a certain score based on different criteria. Those criteria can be found in the advanced settings of the spam filter. So those values that you see here make up the score of one particular email. So as you can see, if the sender IP is listed on one of our real-time blacklists from either Manitou or SpamHouse or SpamCop, then it will get assigned a certain score. In this case, if the sender server is listed on blacklist number 1, it gets assigned a score of 9. If the message ID happens to be empty, that will make another 5 points, so we're at 14. Now if the sender domain is invalid, that will add another 6 points. So we're at 20 points right now. So those values all are added. Our fictitious email has now racked up 20 points. And now we're going to look at the criteria that would speak against an email being spam. That might be the message size. That may be the outbreak shield. So if it happens that one of those values actually speaks in favor, we just take those points from the score that we've racked up so far. We're still at 20 points here, and this is where those thresholds come in. So there's a threshold for suspected spam, for high spam probability, and very high spam probability. So if an email has collected 11 points or more, then it is definitely suspected to be spam. If an email exceeds 15 points, it is, well, most likely spam. And if the value amounts to 20 or more, well, there's hardly any arguing about it. That is pretty much, it's pretty much safe to say that this is a spam email. So 20 points or more means, well, you probably don't need to look at that email. If you need to tweak those settings for whatever reason, then you can do so in this window here. Word of advice though, if you manipulate any of those values in here, you might get results that you don't actually want in your spam detection. So if you need to manipulate those values, you can do so, but we don't recommend it. So that's the malware filter and the spam filter taken care of. But I mentioned that there is a variety of other filters as well. Let's take a look at them. For instance, you have what's called, let's take the gray list filter. Gray listing, if you're not familiar with the term, gray listing exploits a mechanism which the senders of spam emails use in order to get their messages across. So unlike a whitelist or a blacklist, which is, if you will, a binary approach, so it's allowed or it's not allowed, a gray list filter will make a more fine-grained determination whether or not an email is legitimate or not. The usual spam sender will only try to send his email once. And either it's received or it's not received. If it's received, well, that's fine. If it's not received, if the email is rejected or dropped, then, well, big deal, we'll just go over to the next one. And this is where the gray list filter comes into play. Now, our mail security gateway sits there working away happily. An email comes in from a certain sender. We don't know yet whether it's a spam email or not. So what the gray list filter does is it receives the email and then gives back a reply to the last sending server who transmitted the email into our system. Sorry, mate, I'm busy right now. Please come back in 5 minutes and deliver the email again. And a legitimate email server will do that. It will say, all right, not a problem, I will do that, and wait its 5, 10, 15 minutes, and then try to redeliver the email. And as soon as that happens, if our legitimate sending email server attempts to, or makes a new attempt at delivering the email, the gray list filter will then register, okay, this is a legitimate transmission, and it will put, among other things, this, the sending server in its database, and also the sender address, and a few other details. And this is also the reason why you need a SQL database in order to use the gray list filter. So the gray list filter is sort of a holding area for emails that are, not yet decided upon whether they are legitimate or not. Again, it depends on your email provider whether you need to do gray listing or not. Some email providers do a pretty decent amount of filtering already, so you probably don't need to do that to that extent. But if you are running your own show and have your own email server with an MX entry, then, well, you probably want to look into setting up a gray list filter. And if there is regular communication back and forth between your previously unknown sender and yourself and your domain, then this process of verifying whether or not the email is a legitimate one by the gray list filter will not take place again for, in this case, 30 days. So if you have communication on a regular basis with that particular sender, then the sender will only need to go through that verification process every 30 days. And this verification process, when you are getting set up with it, you probably are going to have a few minor delays in email delivery, but they shouldn't be more than, I would say, 15 to 20 minutes, but only for the first setup of the gray list filter. After that, everything should be running smoothly. Okay, so much for the gray list filter. There are other filters in there as well, which I would say are also self-explaining. You can have attachments filtered. So a lot of malware these days, as I mentioned, is transmitted via email. Or I should say via email attachment. And a lot of those attachments are of a certain type. They might disguise themselves as PDF files where they are really executable files or screensaver files or PIF files, something like that. And those extensions you can then specify. So if you opt to forbid certain attachments like exe files or exe files or I don't know, screensaver files or any other format that might be abused for malicious purposes, you just enter the extensions in here and that is pretty much it. The other way around, or the other way of dealing with this, would be to only allow very specific types of email attachments. So if you say, okay, we can't do without email attachments, but the only things that we get sent regularly is the occasional PDF file or a Word document you can then just go and put those extensions in here, and those are then still whitelisted. They are still going to be scanned by your virus scanner, but they are not automatically blocked. If you want to make safe, you can also rename attachments if you get any. And the purpose of renaming an attachment with the suffix, for instance, .danger, is to put another barrier in the way of the user that will prevent him from just opening any old file on a whim. So if somebody gets an email that supposedly contains an invoice or a flight reservation or hotel booking or whatever those things might be, they would still need to right-click the file, save as, and then rename the file, remove the suffix, press enter, and then open the file. So that will most certainly make people, at least more cautious when it comes to email attachments. Oh yeah, we obviously have a language filter, and if you want to prevent emails in a certain language from reaching your systems, then you just need to put a tick in the box for each language which you would not like to have communication in. So if you don't want any emails in Chinese, because you don't speak any and don't have any connections to China or people who speak Chinese, then you just put a tick in a box, click OK, and that is it. By the way, if there are any people here from China, there is no offense meant at all. I'm just using this to make a point. I could just as well have used, I don't know, Dutch or German. Or, as the case may be, Klingon, but I think you get the point. So whichever language you don't want, if you don't want anybody to send emails to you in Klingon, then you just put a tick in the box, click OK, and that is then pretty much it. By the way, Klingon is not a joke. That actually works. So it's pretty nice to see that there are still some fellow geeks in our development department. Joking aside, there are other filters in there, for instance, for external references. I mentioned earlier in this presentation links in emails. So if an email contains a link, that link will then automatically, that link will automatically then be disabled. So nobody can accidentally anyway click on a link because it's been stripped out. So especially useful if you are receiving a lot of phishing emails which want to trick you into visiting a certain website and giving up your, I don't know, your social security number, your PayPal account, your Facebook, your whatever. Okay, I think this is pretty much all there is to say when it comes to GData's mail security and the things that you can do with the Mail Security Gateway. When it comes to the Exchange add-in, there are no surprises there. As I said, you manage the Exchange add-in from the management server or from the GData administrator that you are all familiar with anyway. So let me open that real quick. And I'm going to show you what the GData administrator will look like if you control your Exchange add-in with it. Okay, so here we have our management interface, and down here you will see a separate node that says Exchange, and that is where all your Exchange servers are listed if you have, multiple Exchange servers. And if you select it, you'll get all the options that you need, and those options are pretty much identical to what you can see in the client configuration when it comes to your scans and your idle scans. So usually there is an on-access scan, so as soon as you try to open an element, it will automatically be scanned. You can also configure the Exchange add-in to run the idle scan, so as soon as the management server, or I should say the Exchange server, doesn't have an awful lot to do, then the Exchange add-in will go there and just scan whatever it can get its hands on and make sure that nothing dodgy is in there. And you can also limit the time frame during which the idle scan can be run. So all the other options, I would say, stand for themselves. You can set up tasks for the Exchange add-in. You can set up a scan job for all mailboxes. You can set up a scan job for specific email inboxes. So if you go there, then you see the scan settings are the same as in the regular client settings when you set up a scan job. The default is to scan all mailboxes, but you can also set up a scan to include very specific mailboxes or to scan all mailboxes except XYZ. So the reports can be found here, and the reports are basically going to look the same as they do in the regular client report interface, except that in reported by, it will tell you that it was the Exchange add-in. But the rest of the data is pretty much the same. So going back to the settings for the Exchange server, I touched briefly on what the idle scan does. Now the idle scan will basically scan all the email inboxes that are running on that particular mailbox server during the time frame which you define here. What that does for you is if you run the idle scan, in this case between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m., all the inboxes will be scanned, and the moment the the moment people come in to work in the morning, all email inboxes usually have been scanned, and they can just go on about their business and just rely on the regular on-access scan. That, in theory, eliminates the need to set up dedicated tasks for that. So if you don't have a lot of email inboxes running for you, then you can just leave it to the idle scan to scan the email inboxes. If you have very big email inboxes, or if you have a couple of hundred inboxes, then you probably want to go and set up a specific task for a certain batch of mailboxes which is to be scanned on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, etc. You can furthermore excuse me, you can furthermore also opt to run the scan on all weekdays. So if you remove that tick from the box, it will only run Monday through Friday. If you put a tick in a box, those or the idle scan will be running even on Saturdays and Sundays. If those are regular business days in your organization, then well, there's not much to it. If you have the weekends off, then you can have the email server just sit there and scan all the email inboxes in peace and quiet, because nobody else is doing a lot of work on your Exchange server.